The State of Crypto is presented by Tron, connecting the world to the power of cryptocurrency.
Joining us now to discuss further the SBF trial is partner at law firm Kennyhertz Perry, Braden Perry. Welcome, Braden. So you may have heard we were just discussing the trial that I was watching yesterday. And I just want to start with a really high-level question, because definitely the impression that I got from being there, and just to be clear, my colleagues at CoinDesk are covering this much more extensively. We have people there every day. But the impression that I got is that it is just not looking good for Sam, right? I mean, just basically the stuff that the witnesses are saying. And then also, as we mentioned, kind of just the vibe of the judge, like he just does not seem into Sam Bankman-Fried at all. And so I guess my high-level question for you is, can Sam recover from this? Like, does he have a chance at all? I mean, or is this just kind of like already sort of over?
Well, thanks for having me. It's a good question. And right now, I think Sam Bankman-Fried is in a bad spot. You have a judge that's been ruling against the defense on a number of different issues. I think there are going to be some major upcoming issues that will have to be addressed, including advice of counsel defenses, as well as some of the other types of defenses, including whether or not these investors are going to be made whole and whether or not that matters. And so it has not been a good start to Sam Bankman-Fried's trial for him. That's very clear.
So relatedly, though, I mean, just looking at these witnesses, right? Because like another big theme in this, at least yesterday, was that, Caroline and Gary both struck a deal with the government. Now, obviously, they sort of both made clear that this does not guarantee that they're going to get off free at all, right? It's just sort of like we'll see what happens. But I'd be curious for you to break this down, because you listen to to what they're saying, and yes, they're sort of saying that Sam was steering the ship, but they weren't helping, right? they were doing bad stuff too. So what does it look like for them? I mean, I think yes, they have a deal with the government. No, it's not guaranteed. What are the chances that Caroline and Gary will get off with nothing? Will get off free? I mean, what is the outlook for them?
It's unlikely. I think because of these plea deals, they've pled guilty to crimes. That's first and foremost. Both of them have pled guilty to crimes. When the government needs them as a witness, and generally in these federal trials, you want these cooperating witnesses, and these are the key witnesses for the government. When it comes to their sentencing, it will really depend on a number of different factors, including the guidelines, including the judge. They will have cooperation credit, and it depends on what that is based on how much they help this trial. It's a give and take when it comes to this type of cooperation for these witnesses.
How much longer do you expect things to go on in this trial? I mean, people are expecting weeks, or is it just a few days and they wrap up because they've made a strong case already? What are we looking at here? And if it's going to last a little longer, what else would the prosecution need to do and the defense need to do?
And I think you brought this up earlier. This is a matter for the jury. And what you want to do in a fraud case is show the fraud, ensure you have proved your case, and move on, especially when it comes to complicated cases like this. I think that getting into a lot of the details of crypto to a jury that likely has not had a bunch of experience with it may be a little dangerous for the prosecution, because what this boils down to is a fraud, whether or not Sam Bankman-Fried defrauded investors. And that's what I think the government should stick to. And if they do that, it likely won't last much longer. They've had these key witnesses. They've had a victim. I'm unsure of what they need further after making sure that they make their case that Sam Bankman-Fried defrauded investors.
So on that note, it seems as if a bit of a battle going on between the DOJ and the defense around the introduction of information around the Anthropic investment is coming up. We've had the prosecution say, we do not want this mentioned, that this is a distraction. But it looks as if the defense would really like to discuss this, which I gather is perhaps an effort to complicate the thing. Valuation of FTX actually has all these other really complicated factors, and you're not really getting the full picture. What's your take on that, and should that be admitted into evidence?
Yeah, it's a good move by the defense, because all you need is one juror. And so if you're providing this information about how the valuation of FTXs worked and whether or not there was victim harm, those other issues that all come into a distraction of the fact that the prosecution is trying to prove is that Sam Bankman-Fried committed fraud, then that brings into play additional room to argue reasonable doubt. And again, it's a complicating factor. I think it's going to be extremely complicated for jurors who don't have experience in understanding these valuations or what the effect of this investment's activity was on FTX as a whole. So, if this defense gets thrown out, if the advice of counsel defense gets thrown out, where the judge is not allowing this type of testimony, it could be really damaging to the defense.
We keep asking this question of a number of our guests here. We'll ask it to you. Do you think that Sam should take the stand?
As a criminal defense attorney, I would not want him to take the stand. I think that, and again, it's a very dynamic situation. You have to evaluate the government's case that's been put on. As a lawyer, your advice generally is do not put him on the stand. Again, it's his decision in the end. And frankly, at this point in time, I would discourage it.
I actually have one technical question while you're here. I know that one of the charges that Caroline mentioned was wire fraud. Can you clarify specifically what that means in that case? Because the wire fraud is such a broad. I mean, the other ones are really clear. It's like, securities fraud, commodities fraud, whatever. What is wire fraud specifically in this context?
So the way you bring wire fraud and the way the jurisdiction works within federal cases is you have to have a piece of jurisdictional, for lack of a better word, hook to the case. And wire fraud essentially is just using means to facilitate the fraud. And so it can be anything from phone, and that's a traditional wire fraud standard, is using the phone lines to facilitate fraud. That's how they did a number of the mafia cases. But now it's more technical, including emails, including the internet. Anything associated with the transmission of communications or other type of data during the commission of the fraud is considered wire fraud.
It seems as if one of the key issues is going to be addressing who, in fact, was in charge of Alameda, whether or not Caroline had authority, or whether she was taking lead from Sam on this, and clearly, Gary Wang's testimony that he was instructed to write code that would have given Alameda an unlimited opportunity to draw down funds was something that speaks to Sam Bankman-Fried's kind of uber control of everything. Do you think there's still an opportunity to challenge that? I mean, do you think that there's a way for the defense to come back and suggest that she really did have some role in this?
Yeah, I think so. And again, this is a factor when it comes to the defense. The argument that it was all Sam Bankman-Fried is something that's almost laughable, because at some point these individuals, Wang, Ellison, they committed acts on their own, and they have pled guilty to committing those acts, which are criminal acts. And so to blame everything on Sam Bankman-Fried, I think is something the prosecution is trying to prove, but they don't need that. All they need is his cooperation as a conspirator in this fraud as a whole. So, to the extent that they're wanting to prove that he was instructing everything related to this fraud, I don't think they need it, but that's what they're trying to do. And in the end, obviously the plea deals set out the facts related to both Wang and Ellison and their acts that they committed themselves.
All right. Well, thank you, Braden. That was Kennyhertz Perry partner, Braden Perry.